Proverbs. Some people may think, well, why do you want to study the book of Proverbs? You know, that's the old Bible, they say. That's the Old Testament. I was in a congregation one time a number of years ago, and I happened to overhear someone in the congregation say, oh, we're studying the old Bible. That's not important. Something to that effect. And I thought, oh, you don't know what you just said. You don't know how you just cast aspersions upon the Word of God. Because the Bible, all of it, is the Word of God, the Old and the New. Of course, we follow the New as our rule of faith and practice today, and it superseded the old law, the law of Moses. But there are many things in the Old Testament that are important for us to know and to learn. The book of Proverbs is a book of wise sayings, mostly written by Solomon, about the practical affairs of life, especially emphasizing righteousness and the fear of God. Like the Psalms and the Pentateuch involves the first 5 books of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The book of Proverbs is divided according to its titles and 5 parts. It has 5 parts. For example, chapters 1 through 9 are the Proverbs of Solomon to the young men, it says. And then in chapters 10 through 24 are additional Proverbs of Solomon. And then chapters 25 through 29 are the Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of Hezekiah copied. And then Proverbs chapter 30 are the words of Agur, and then chapter 31, the words of Lemuel. And that's how that it could be divided up. And you may see that in the outline that you've been handed this evening. Solomon is credited with writing most of the Proverbs, as we've said. He seems to have about the same relation to Proverbs that David has to the Psalms. And if you know your Bible very well at all, you know what relation David has to the Psalms. Each of these men was the principal writer of the respective books. Psalms is a book of devotion, and the book of Proverbs is a book of practical ethics. And it's a joy to study and to read the book of Proverbs. A couple of years ago at Harley Bridge Road, we spent over a year, I guess, studying on Wednesday nights the book of Proverbs. It was very interesting. When we think about Proverbs, we have to think about the author of the book. And as we said, primarily Solomon is the author of the book of the Proverbs. Who is Solomon? Well, many of you know who Solomon was. Solomon was one of the sons of David. He was the 3rd king over the United Kingdom of Israel, and he reigned over the nation of Israel for 40 years. And Israel attained the greatest wealth and the greatest height of whatever it could achieve during the days of David and Solomon in particularly during the time of King Solomon. As a young man, Solomon had a consuming passion for knowledge and wisdom. And that's a great thing. I wish that every young man, every young woman today had a consuming passion for knowledge and wisdom. I want to learn. I want to know everything I can know. I want to learn as many things about life, about living, about whatever subject there is. I want to know all I can know about that. Solomon was that kind of a person. We go to 1 Kings chapter 3 and verse 9. 1 Kings chapter 3 and verse 9, and begin reading there. We learn some things that God and Solomon are talking about. Solomon was about to become the king, and God asked him, what do you want? What can I do for you? And in verse 9, Solomon said, therefore give to your servant an understanding heart, to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil, for who is able to judge this great people of yours? The speech pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. Then God said to him, because you have asked this thing, and have not asked long life for yourself, nor have asked riches for yourself, nor have asked the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern justice, behold, I have done according to your words. See, I have given you a wise and understanding heart, so that there has not been anyone like you before you, nor shall any like you arise after you. And I have also given you what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be anyone like you among the kings all your days. What an interesting conversation conversation this was between God and Solomon. So Solomon asked for wisdom and understanding that he might rule the people of God. He became the literary prodigy of his day. The intellectual attainments of Solomon were the wonder of his age, of his time. Kings and queens came from all over the then known world to visit with Solomon, to hear the things that he had to say, his words of wisdom. They were able to observe all the wealth that he had. And as it was said concerning the Queen of Sheba, when she came to see Solomon, she said, "The half has not yet been told." Of all the things that Solomon could talk about and all the things that Solomon had, which one could observe. He lectured on things like botany and zoology. He was a scientist, a political ruler. He was a businessman with vast enterprises. And he was a poet, a moralist, and a preacher. We go to 1 Kings chapter 4, and beginning in verse 29. 1 Kings 4, beginning in verse 29. And we see some very interesting things here about Solomon and what he was able to do in his relation to God. And God gave Solomon wisdom and exceedingly great understanding and largeness of heart like the sand of the seashore. Thus Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the men of the east and all the wisdom of Egypt, for he was wiser than all men, than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Heman and Chalcol, and Garda the sons of Mahal, and his fame was in all the surrounding nations. He spoke 3,000 proverbs. Notice that he spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. And he spoke of trees, from the cedar tree of Lebanon, even to the hyssop that springs out of the wall. He spoke also of animals, of birds, of creeping things, and of fish. And men of all nations, from all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom, came to hear the wisdom of Solomon. What an amazing thing that must have been, to go and to visit with him and to hear him talk as an authority, as an expert on so many different things. And that wisdom was given to him by the God of heaven. In 1 Kings chapter 9, we have recorded for us a great many of the accomplishments and acquisitions that Solomon made during his time as king over Israel. And I won't go into reading that chapter because it just goes on and on. It tells about all the things that he accomplished, all the things that he had, and it is an astounding chapter in the Bible to read of the great wealth of this great king of Israel. Well, we're talking about Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, and what Proverbs themselves are. What is a proverb? A proverb has been described or defined as a short, pithy, P-I-T-H-Y, axiomatic saying, the life of which is antithesis and comparison. Somebody said, I don't quite understand all that. Well, the sayings of the Proverbs are wholly unconnected, and they are designed primarily as a form of teaching. And some of them are repeated in the text as practical thoughts in a form that would stick in a person's mind. So they're short, brief, clear statements about certain things that are given in such a way that you automatically remember it. It stays in your mind, and even you go down the way, a long way away, and down the road of time for years, and you'll still remember those proverbs. They'll stick in your mind, and that's the idea. The idea that they'll stay in your mind. The Hebrew word for the word proverb comes from a root word that means to be like, to be like. So that proverbs often involve descriptive comparisons. They're very similar to a parable, but they're not a parable. But proverbs are similar to them. The comparisons may be positive, they may be negative. They're comparing one thing to something else. Strongly negative comparisons in Proverbs sometimes are called bywords or taunts. Somebody said, what do you mean? Well, when you read the book of Proverbs and you read the negative proverbs that are there, it's almost like the author something or someone or some action that somebody is taking, and it gets your attention immediately, and it stays with you. And these proverbs are given to us as warnings, and they're given to us as admonitions. Proverbs are customarily rooted in accumulated experience as generalizations. We want to keep that thought in mind. They're generalizations. Effective proverbs live on within the culture as practical guidelines, and they even spread to other places, other cultures, from culture to culture, as people are seeking the profit from the accumulated wisdom of people wherever they may go. And this is true. We see there are words of wisdom that come from Asia, from the Far East. We have sayings that come from various cultures of the past. But the sayings that are found here in the book of Proverbs are inspired of God. They are God's Word. Proverbs have been defined as simple illustrations that expose fundamental realities of life. These statements, these maxims, if you want to call them that, are not theoretical, but they're very practical, very down to earth, and they're very easily based on real life experiences and designed for use in the mainstream of life. How do I know how I should conduct myself? How do I know how to respond, how to react? What should I say in this case or in that situation? Well, go to the Proverbs and I may find some biblical advice as to what I might say or do in this particular situation. Somebody says, well, what would you say are the key to the Proverbs? What do you think is very important as we approach this book and you begin to study the things that are found within the text of the book of Proverbs? What is the heart of the book? I would suggest to you that the heart of the book of Proverbs can be found in chapter 1, verses 5 through 7, and also in chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Let's take a look at Proverbs 1, verses 5 through 7. Let's see what Solomon had to say. He said, a wise man, and by the way, you're going to read the word wise many times in this book, and you're going to read the word fool or foolish many times. A wise man will hear and increase learning, and a man of understanding will attain wise counsel, to understand a proverb and an enigma, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Well, that's a powerful statement right there. And it really gives us the central idea of what Proverbs is all about. How can I become wise? How can I act wisely in contrast to acting and speaking foolishly in the various situations of life in which I find myself? In chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy paths. That's powerful. Stop and think about that for a moment. Trust in the Lord, to what degree? With all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy paths. Oh, that's beautiful. And we need to take that to heart. We need to think about it. We need to read that. We need to study it and contemplate that. In biblical thought, wisdom is wedded to righteousness. Let me say that again. Wisdom is wedded to righteousness. Somebody says, I'm not quite sure I understand what you're saying. Okay? The wise person, according to the Bible, the wise person is a righteous person. The righteous person is one who exercises wisdom. What is righteousness? Righteousness is doing what God says. It's doing right according to what God says right is. So if I have a heart of wisdom, then I'm going to be doing what is right in the sight of God. For this reason, by definition, there is no wise atheist, is there? Think about it for a moment. An atheist may be extremely clever. An atheist may be extremely brilliant. He may have and attain a high degree so far as this world's knowledge is concerned. But According to Psalm 14, verse 1, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. That's right. There is no God. So, as smart, as intelligent as an atheist may be, God calls him a fool. Well, that may give some of us who don't attain some of the high worldly accolades that some atheists have a little bit of hope. Maybe there's hope for me if I don't follow the way of the fool, the atheist, and I follow the way of the Lord. Well, that's exactly right. But there's something else that goes along with this as well. Think about it now. Wisdom is connected with righteousness. I want to keep that in mind. But think about this also. Service to God. Service to God. From time to time in the book of Proverbs, you'll read the phrase, the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Connect that phrase, the fear of the Lord, with service to God. And think about it for just a minute. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Serving the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. If I'm going to be a proper servant of God, if I'm going to be a wise person, then I'm going to have to be what God wants me to be. I've got to be His true servant. So, developing and maintaining a close relationship to God is one of the dominant major themes of the book of Proverbs. How can I be close to God? How can I be well-pleasing in the sight of God? How can I live a life that is acceptable unto God? Well, I must have the fear of the Lord in my heart. What does that mean? I must be serving the Lord as He wants me to serve Him. This is very similar to what our Lord was saying in Matthew chapter 7, beginning in verse 24. When He said, He that heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man, which built his house on a rock. And the rain descended, the floods came, the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. But he that heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them not, I will liken him unto a foolish man, who built his house upon the sand. And the rains descended, the floods came, the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. What's the difference in these two men? One had the fear of the Lord. One did not. What's the difference in these two men? He that heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, he that heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them not. Who is the wise man and who is the foolish man? The Lord Himself defines that for us, doesn't He? The wise man is the one who hears and obeys, builds his house on the solid rock of Christ. The foolish man is the one who refuses to hear the Word of God, builds his life on the shifting sand, and loses his soul. And so as we look at the book of the Proverbs, there are many things that we need to take into our minds, into our hearts, about the fear of the Lord, serving the Lord. And remember that wisdom is wedded to righteousness. What about the key chapter? The key chapter in the book of Proverbs. I would suggest to you that the key chapter is chapter 31. Chapter 31. The last chapter in Proverbs is unique. It's unique in ancient literature as it reveals a very high and noble view of women. Our world, in days gone by, in ages gone by, as well as in our time, in many places and among many cultures, has no respect for women at all. The Bible, though, gives us a high and elevated status concerning women. And we need to recognize that fact. The woman in these verses, the worthy woman as we often call her, think about some things that are said in this passage. She is a good woman. She is a good wife. She is a good mother. She is a good neighbor. She is a good business person. Her conduct, her speech, her interest, her life, everything about her stand in a sharp contrast to the woman who is pictured in Proverbs chapter 7, beginning in verse 6. Let's take a look at Proverbs 7, verse 6 for just a moment. The writer says, For at the window of my house I looked through my lattice, and saw among the simple, I perceived among the youths, a young man devoid of understanding. I saw a young man who was devoid of understanding. Here's a young man who isn't too smart. He's not using his brain in the way he ought to be using it, is what the writer is saying. Passing along the street near her corner, and he took the path to her house in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night, and there a woman met him with the attire of a harlot and a crafty heart. And he goes on throughout this chapter and talks about this evil woman. So you contrast chapter 7 with chapter 31, and we see how a woman can destroy herself and debase herself, or she may elevate herself. She may be highly respected and highly regarded. The worthy woman. Key chapter, the book of Proverbs. What are some of the subjects that are discussed and addressed in the book of Proverbs? Well, Proverbs teaches skillful living in multiple aspects of everyday life. In fact, that's what the theme is, isn't it? Everyday living. That's what it's all about. The specific precepts of Proverbs include instruction on wisdom and folly or foolishness, the righteous and the wicked, the tongue, pride and humility, justice and vengeance, the family, laziness and work and industriousness, poverty and wealth, friends and neighbors, love and lust, anger and strife, masters and servants, and life and death. Proverbs talks about all of these things. It has a lot to say about it. Proverbs touches upon every facet of human relationships. And its principles go far beyond the bounds of time and culture. It wouldn't matter if this was the 21st century, or if it was the 16th century, or if it's the 50th century. If the world stands that